Hi, Kevin. Welcome back.
Yeah, hi, Adam. I'm always happy to be here with you now for the fourth time, I think, already.
Yeah, but it's your fault. So you are no more researching blockchains, and I guess, no. After recent conversation with me and porting everything to Java, you said, it is just mission impossible, and you quit your job. This is what happened?
Yeah, it's a little bit funny because, of course, I remember our last session we had about blockchain, about Ethereum specifically. And back then, already I had in my mind that there's a high chance that I will do something else soon, but I couldn't yet speak about it. So, so that's
Okay. So you were not completely honest with me. So this.
I was honest, so I never lied, and I was at this point in time, I was doing blockchain research, and officially I'm still a PhD student, so I'm doing my PhD in this blockchain field.
Okay.
Officially, yes, but on the other hand, it's a little bit on hold right now.
Okay. What happened also? I had a nice chat with the Cumulus people, and what they also have, they have Ethereum extension for Cumulus. Mm-hmm. So, and they are using this on energy sector in some projects. So, it's also interesting part. So now, so everything is on hold. So, what are you doing right now? I mean, what happened?
Yeah, so one could say I made my hobby my job. Yes, so one of my hobbies was working in open source, working on the Testcontainers project. We also talked about this in a former episode. It's a Java library for integration testing and spinning up your dependencies for integration testing using Docker containers underneath. Mm-hmm. And beginning of the year 2021. We thought about making a company that can make a product that supports test containers, or in a way uses test containers, or maybe expands on features we are already offering with test containers with the open source project. And this company was created in the year 2021 by Richard and Sergey, who are the other maintainers of test containers. Mm-hmm. So it's an, more or less a US-based company, also VC funded. You can say it's a startup, but for me personally, it doesn't feel like a startup, because when I think about startup, I think about like this young people out of university doing a startup. It's not really like this. And, in this company, we are working on a product now, which is Testcontainers Cloud.
Okay, Testcontainers Cloud.
And I joined as the first engineer, so to say. Okay. So they asked me, they said like, yeah, we have the company, you're one of the maintainers. Don't you want to join as the first engineer? And I was thinking like, should I join? Can I go on with my PhD when I join? But I thought, I think this is a chance I have to do now. I want to be part of this, and I want to see where this will end up and where test containers will end up. And so I joined, basically in the evening, I called my professor. I said like, oh, sorry, I have to quit. By the way, I have 1 month's holiday left, so I'm out now, kind of. And then I was back in the industry.
So at least you didn't join as a manager. So developer is a good choice,
Totally. I agree. Yes. And I had to take some time getting used to the normal development routine, and also doing more in the cloud development sector, because this 2 years now, academic work is very different. You read a lot, you write a lot, just 2 years. And
incredible. I thought it's like you quit after, 3 months. So 2 years is a long time. Okay.
No, I was. Really? Yes.
So you didn't
2
code.
Years is enough, maybe.
So you didn't code too much. So it seems like, right? So are you?
No, not too much. So I really read a lot. I wrote a lot. I was in many meetings for the research projects and so on, which was a bit manager-like. Yeah, so that was not always the most enjoyable and most technical stuff. So now I'm doing more technical stuff again, which makes me even more happy.
Nice. And your professor was happy with the decision, or was he angry?
So he was, of course, maybe a little bit sad, but then, of course, also kind of supporting me and saying, yeah, if this is what you want to do, what you're motivated about, do it. But he said, like, okay, be aware, even if you tell me now, you still will do your PhD on the side. I don't think this will happen. Like, if you do this now, the chances that you will finish your PhD are decreasing enormously, which is maybe true, but ultimately, I don't know. The PhD thing it wasn't that important for me, getting a PhD. I just wanted to do research. And if I was getting a PhD like this, it would have been also cool. And maybe I finish it in the future, maybe not.
Yeah. What I don't understand this argument, I actually wrote a few books aside. So I just wrote the books during that time, So I was travel a lot. I spent a lot of time in hotels. There was nothing to do, so I wrote a book. You could actually do the same with PhD, right? Or is it different?
100% you can do, yes.
Okay.
And so I talked with some people who wrote books like for the big publishers, O'Reilly, Manning, whatever. Yeah. And so what I heard of them, like the work involved in writing a really good technical book, it's maybe as much work as a PhD thesis, yeah. So
okay, so it's similar. So what I can tell you can absolutely do this. And if you will have to travel a few times, to US, there's a long flight. So I achieve a lot during Java 1, journeys.
That sounds good.
Yeah, this is no problem at all. Okay, perfect. So you mentioned the name of the product is Testcontainers in the cloud?
Testcontainers Cloud is the name.
Testcontainer Cloud.
Testcontainers Cloud.
Testcontainers Cloud.
Exactly.
So what is it?
So basically, it is a way to use your existing test containers, project test containers integration. And instead of running the containers locally on your machine for the integration testing, it will spin up the containers transparently in the cloud. So if you run Testcontainers Cloud, you don't have to make any changes to your code base whatsoever. And it will just in a really transparent way start up all those potentially big dependencies you have for integration testing in the cloud and more or less on demand. Yes.
So it's like serverless sounds for me. So it's like serverless for sure, because you can start resources without provisioning the server. So you're just starting them and this works. And why I should do this?
So it is a little bit aligned with the current movement we've seen in the industry, also with those cloud IDEs coming up. And a lot of modern hardware we see, or the development in hardware we see, is more towards like fast, light and small machines, like, for example, the new MacBook, M1 MacBooks and so on, that are fast, but actually not super beefy with regards like to having a lot of memory or whatever, like better for spiking usage or whatever. So if you do it like this, you still have your nice small machine. And when you then need the really big stuff, which you just need for a short amount of time while your tests run, they appear more or less magically in the cloud. Yes, your code, your local Java server or whatever, speaks with them, speaks with the Elasticsearch, speaks with the Kafka to do the integration test. And then it's, afterwards they are gone again. And you didn't use a lot of resources. You don't have to think in a way, okay, when I now choose my workstation, do I want to have a small, light machine? Do I really need like a heavy workstation? Actually, like the light machine is enough, like, because compiling the Java and so on, you don't need that much power. But if you run the big integration test, you need the power. And we've seen this in the past, that people started to choose developer workstations based on the resources ultimately necessary for run sometimes the big test suite, which now includes more integration tests, because people learned with Docker doing those integration tests is really nice. But then suddenly you need the big machines with 64 gigabyte of RAM or 32 gigabyte or whatever. Yeah. And, like this, it just works really nice. And also if you're using a cloud IDE, you can also integrate it with this. Then you have like things already in the cloud speaking with each other. But of course, also if you're running locally in IntelliJ, NetBeans, whatever, it will still transparently connect to this.
Yeah. What I see is, and some of my enterprise clients have trouble with virus scanning and all this stuff, and even Docker. So I would say in this particular case, could be really interesting, because the problem is not that the machines, but because all of the stuff which is already installed on the machines, they are so slow and unusable, basically. So one funny story is I use Payara a lot, and it started on my machine in 2-3 seconds, and it was 1 to 3 minutes on client's machine because of virus scanning. So I see the point. So what also could be interesting, if I could hibernate the environment, so I don't have to spin up everything over and over again, rather than I will get my own environment or workspace in the cloud pre-cached or pre-installed, so I can very quickly spin up the resources. This would be the killer use case, like stateful environment.
Yeah, exactly. And these are some of the things we are working on, like basically. So I can't go too much into the details what is in the pipeline, but those kind of things, like further improving, having further speed up improvements, for example, by having certain containers that are normally used in certain states already available for you to use, and then you're losing a lot of the initial overhead. So with containers, we are quite fast with starting them up, but still it's a couple of seconds. And if we can cut away these couple of seconds, we get even a faster feedback cycle. We can move more into those TDD cycles, even with integration testing. And for me, this is pretty cool. Like, depending on the application you develop, but if you can have such a TDD-like cycle with real integration tests, if you are coding at the outside layer of your application, I personally really like this. Yeah. And you spoke about another topic with regards to enterprise users and their security restrictions or whatever. Especially if you think about Windows. So we have Docker for Windows, but it requires certain capabilities to be installed, and they are not always allowed. Yeah. And if you use Testcontainers Cloud, you don't necessarily need Docker on your machine. It will still work.
It was okay. So what you are doing, you are like a proxy. So you are managing remotely the containers. So for you, is everything the same? So it looks like the annotations, everything remains the same. Mm-hmm. So what you did is you just redirecting the management traffic, so stopping the containers to the cloud, right?
Yeah. So for Testcontainers itself, so the Testcontainers open source library we have, it already supports running remote against the remote Docker or whatever. We have a lot of different strategies that we support. So Testcontainers itself uses Docker Java, and Docker Java talks with Docker over the Docker REST API. And depending on the environment, the Docker daemon can run on will have a Unix socket open, or on Windows a named pipe or whatever, and you can use this connection to just interact with it using its REST API. And of course, it could also run somewhere else. And many users already do this in certain CI environments. The Docker daemon might run somewhere else, not on the build node, for example. And Testcontainers support.
What I did actually just for fun at the beginning with Angular 1. So I wanted to play with Angular 1. So I wrote a small app which communicated directly with Docker via REST and JSON, and you could even expose Docker via CORS. So I could really just connect, to the Docker daemon from Angular 1 back then, early Angular 1, and was able to manage the Docker containers, which was actually fun.
Yes, it's a lot of fun. And so this is another topic that is not related to Testcontainers Cloud, but to the container ecosystem, and something many people are not aware of. So when they use Docker, I think about the Docker CLI, and then, for example, Podman came. And for some time, it was advocated as the drop-in replacement. Just make an alias of Docker with the Podman alias, and then you're good to go. But especially in the beginning, aliasing the CLI, okay, this is one thing, but exposing a server that has the same API and behaves the same way was a completely different story. And but now they also work on the support and become more of a replacement on this stuff. So this is another interesting topic in the whole container world, basically.
Container wars.
Container world.
So what I remember,
container world.
Container wars. So what I said wars because how all the containers happened and started with Docker, and Docker became more and more powerful. And then in one point of time, companies said, okay, we would like to standardize the Docker, and they created a spec to decouple Docker product from the container technology. And this is when the drama or the wars started, because there was the project Rocket, right? You remember Rocket?
Back then.
Rocket, and the Rocket was like supposed to be better than Docker and use the same spec. And I even think recently Kubernetes said they are no more depending on Docker, right? So they can just use the container API without being depending on Docker.
Yeah, there are a couple of components. I'm not the super expert on those lower level of details, but you have like the run C and the container D. And then, of course, you also had the very cool move by the Docker engineers to open source core parts of Docker, actually, and make it available to the community, which was a great move also towards better standardization, I think.
Yeah. And now we have two parts, the Docker community and the Docker enterprise. Actually, even two companies. There's one company which runs Docker for developers, and the other one, Docker Enterprise, which is kind of Kubernetes competitor almost, I would say. So it happened, I think, 2 years ago. So they split this. But back to your product. So you are almost done. So what I heard is everything works already in open source. So you just coded a little bit Javadoc and you are done, right? So this was your task in the last 2 weeks.
There's of course a lot of more stuff involved in the background and running things at scale and making sure it's secure for different users to do the stuff. But yeah, so there was a lot of work involved, and there is a lot of more work going forward, and especially regarding those features to bring further speed improvement and further improvements for the cycle time of the testing. So yeah.
What I can imagine that what you could do, the developer, you can request a kind of profile where the developer says, I'm interested in Postgres with this data and Kafka with these brokers, and then you can prepare this environment to speed it up. And this could be a commercial feature, right? So you can say, okay, then it costs a little bit of money, and then you can just run it and use it.
Testcontainers Cloud is a commercial product, and therefore there are I think different strategies for the future, how to orientate the business, what could be the way people will pay for different stuff. But at the core, it is pay per use. So it will be a pay per use model that you ultimately pay for the resource usage. So if you're not running the tests, you're not having to pay because you're not using the resources then.
Another thing. So one thing is to just, to run Postgres in a test and then shut it down. Or run Kafka in a test and then shut it down. Another interesting use case could be if I could just say, give me a Postgres for 5 minutes. Not for testing. I mean, just to playing around with as a proof of concept. Because this happens often to me, I would like to try something out with, let's say, Quarkus and JPA or Panache or something like this. And I need Postgres. So what I do, I spin up Postgres. I know where it is in my Docker and do it. The same is true for Kafka. Or even application server. So I have a couple of scripts. So in a second, I can just create Kafka from scratch just by deleting the old one, creating the new one, and deleting the directories with the state. But this could also be interesting for you. So I can say you can have another API. Just say I need a temporary Docker. Give me one. Docker Postgres. So I get an instance. I can low power instance. I can run it because otherwise on the cloud it's a little bit more hard. If you would like to provision a database, a real one, even the easiest possible database, it is. So from the console, let's take AWS console. This is somehow easy, but it will take the first time at least 5 minutes until you have an instance. And then you have to care about the firewall, security groups, VPCs, and ports and stuff like that. But this could be also interesting, right? So I can say, just give me this.
So in a way, the basic feature and the basic API we already have in Testcontainers. And I used this use case in Testcontainers as well. So for example, if you're using the Quarkus dev mode, which I haven't played around with too much myself, but under the hood, it uses already test containers to spin up certain components like the database.
And it works great. So the last week I started the continuous testing, I think it's called or interactive testing, where you just say, Quarkus dev, Quarkus compile, Quarkus :dev. So it starts in this mode. And if something breaks or it recognizes Kafka, it starts in Testcontainers Kafka. So it
yes, exactly. And
great.
if you are running then Testcontainers Cloud as the application, the Testcontainers Cloud user, this will transparently run those container workloads in Testcontainers Cloud.
But this is complete different user experience. What I have in mind is a little, in addition what you are providing, it's complete different use case, the same tech. What you could do, you can provide a small command line interface and say new Postgres. And with my configuration, and I get Postgres with open port, and then I can create a small app. I just use my Postgres, and then at the end I just shut it down. It is more like experimentation mode, not testing mode. Experimentation of proof of concept.
But I can also tell you, we have this interface for you. You can already use it with the normal test containers, but then also with Testcontainers Cloud. But it is not strictly speaking a command line interface. Just use the existing Java API, and it will do this. So, for example, what you could do, it could be a Groovy script, but it could also be a Java class. Doesn't matter. Like just a main class, for example. Yes, you define the containers you want to have. You start this Java program, and while the Java program is running, those containers are living. And if you would exit the program, it cleans it up. This works with test containers, and this also works then transparently with Testcontainers Cloud. And it is a very, good example use case, for example, that is outside of the testing and more, for this interactive development mode. And yes, you can bring up very beefy environments, and then just interact with them on your small machine or whatever. Yeah.
Concrete example. So I'm for a client, I'm using Postgres with Debezium and Kafka. And a common use case is, to delete everything and start from scratch because I'm working in another area. So I just built the setup with Docker from scratch. But in your particular case, it would be interesting for me to say, okay, give me the same environment, but new. So I'm playing with it 2 hours, and after 2 hours, okay, again. And I can do this with clouds, but the clouds are more towards security, and I have configured everything. So this is completely different focus. And in your case, could be quick and dirty, such a thing. And I know I can do this because, what you're doing all the time in the unit test, right? This is like before each and after. This is exactly what happens. But as a product, AtomicJar product, this would be from the user experience. If you had a REST-like API where you can do this, could be actually a great feature, right? So like experimentation or PoC mode, PoCman, POC man, something like this, right? Because you have already everything in place. So instead shutting everything down after the tests, if you keep it running, we have it.
Yes, and there are some things for this actually also already in test containers for some time, but not in stable, still experimental features. But you can enable it.
You are not a good salesman. You are not a good salesman. You have to say, we have in the pipeline, and we are selling you with additional fee, but not everything.
Yeah. So the thing is, if you use it in test containers, it is so far. So if you would use it in test containers, it would still use your local machine, which might be not suitable depending on the environment you want to set up. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but you can use this existing test containers feature. This is a reusable mode. But as I said, it's just an experimental feature in test containers so far. But if you would use this in conjunction with Testcontainers Cloud, you also have this kind of scenario. But of course, right now we are talking about like some technical bare bones features that we have in test containers and that you can use and that they transparently integrate already. But as you said, there will be more polished features coming up. And ultimately, what we want to focus on and always try to focus and already focused on with Test Containers, the open source project, is in a way improving developer productivity and also developer happiness. That's always how I thought about it, because so I like to run smooth integration tests, and I know I like to develop from the tests and don't run stuff manually, check stuff manually. And if I can all the time be in my IDE, code around, write the test, and all the setup of the environment always happening automatically in the background, it makes me a happy developer, so to say.
Another idea comes to mind. Expanding on this, what I explain you right now. What I have the problem often, I'm working with different companies, and sometimes I create a proof of concept with some apps, and always the question how to share this. So what I already did, I of course get private GitHub repo and say do this, and then it's installed. This is painful. Another thing, what I already did, I created AWS account and gave them the access key to this account, so they could just use it. And but in this particular case, what we could do is we can say, okay, I start the entire app in Testcontainers and give a kind of a signed URL or link to the other developer, and the other developer can just continue. This would be also perfect thing for reproducers.
Yes, indeed, yes.
So if you would like to, because we also found an bug in Debezium, and this was quite hard because I had one machine, my client had another machine, and I had to create a reproducer or at least explain what happens with such an environment. Could be actually great. So you can say, I would like to keep it running for 1 day, and then I send the link, and or the link, and you can hibernate or stop the container. And if someone accesses the link after 30 seconds, you can have exactly the same environment, right?
Yes.
This is actually a great use case for another product, AtomicJar, like the repro man. So we have the PoC man and the repro man, but this could be one of the killer use cases, right? So like a Dropbox, easy share files. It is like easy share the environments.
And there are different things imaginable. Like the one thing is if you are just sharing like the Java code that sets up the environment, like the moment someone executes it, it just spins it up. So you don't, depending on what you want to do, you don't need to have a hibernating environment somewhere. If it's easy to just spin it up and just for a while you want to check it out. For demos, this is a great use case, especially demos that would be more involved, need more components to be running, maybe not even possible to run a local machine, not possible to run on Docker for Windows. What do I know?
Yeah. If you just consider Kafka, let's say, so if you would like to do something reasonable with Kafka in such an environment, you will need right now Kafka, Zookeeper as well. So Zookeeper will go away, but right now we still need Zookeeper. Then if you have Debezium, so you will have Debezium connector running in Kafka as well. Then probably 1 or 2 Quarkus, and everything would be in Docker Compose, which may or may not work. So if it doesn't work, it's usually because of a firewall in the companies or something like this, and this would be a little more easier because all the Docker Compose and whatever happens on the server side, so or on the cloud side, not on the server side. So the surface area is linear between me and the code.
Yes,
right?
and you are so Testcontainers cloud or AtomicJar is in control of the environment in which the Docker containers are running, and therefore we can provide an environment in which we know the containers are able to run. So we have another example. Some containers are privileged containers. So they have more capabilities, like when they want to mount the Unix socket, for example. And for some use cases, you want this, or this is a useful thing. And some CI environments don't support this. And Testcontainers also has one component that uses a privileged container, like the Rio container. And then it's sometimes even hard to run the Testcontainers test suite in those CI environments if their Docker environment is too locked up. And by this, you also make this someone else's problem. Testcontainers Cloud's problem in this case, but Testcontainers Cloud can provide the environment that is configured in a way that all those kind of Docker containers can run there with all the features.
It sounds interesting. So, why the name AtomicJar?
So, we have the jar file from Java. So that was definitely inspiration for us. And I think that's all I can tell about this. I think there is no
okay, because if I saw the AtomicJar, I expected something different to test containers. And by the way, someone approached me from the marketing department and asked me, to talk with one of the founders. And I said, okay, no time right now. But then you approach me and I said, okay, I know you, so it should be fun,
That's great to hear.
And there was what's the name? This is the Java champion guy who talks a lot. There was the Evgeny? Sergey, exactly, Sergey. So I will also invite him, but back then I was absolutely overloaded with work. So this basically all. So now you're focusing on remotely starting and stopping containers, right?
If you break it down like this, it's about this, yeah.
Now you have work. So what do your commits
my
are around
work.
this area, right?
So
Yeah.
Okay. It is about building the cloud infrastructure and the cloud platform that allows then the users to do this, like remotely running test containers. Yes. So there's a lot of work, of course, in maintaining and developing all the aspects of such a infrastructure that it scales and that it's secure and everything. It's quite a challenge, actually, especially if you think about that you want to provide all Docker features, because like this is in a way opposed to making it secure. So if you give more capabilities to Docker, then it becomes less secure, of course, or like the attack vector becomes bigger, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's quite challenging, and there is of course a lot of classical software stuff in the background, back-end stuff for all the business sides of the product. And there's also a lot of stuff to do in test containers as an open source library to just continuously support it and show that we really care about the open source project test containers and want to make sure that this is a very healthy and good open source project that everyone can use, also besides Test Containers Cloud, of course, because that's very important for us to have a healthy Test Containers open source project as its core.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk about the cloud? So are you running on AWS?
On all clouds.
On all clouds, okay. Yeah, but you are working on all clouds right now?
Google Cloud, AWS, Oracle, Azure, yes.
Okay, but then this is even more challenging to provide such an infrastructure because, the security models are completely different between the clouds. The features are similar, but the security encryption is very different, right? If you compare Azure, AWS, or GCP. So I would say there is a lot to do for
definitely, you. Definitely. But this is so I'm also not the one currently most involved in those stuff, in the cloud development, just because I really, to this day, didn't have a big experience with cloud. So all my life, I was like a German enterprise developer, and German enterprises for a long time didn't do a lot of cloud stuff, always on premise, everything and so on. Yeah. So I'm having more this background than I was in blockchain. There was also not a lot of cloud stuff we did back then. So it's, although we have cloud now for many years, for me it's a new thing. Yeah. So, I'm learning a lot and it's crazy.
So funny you say this because, I ignored the clouds for 2 years. I started looking at the cloud more closely 3 years. And the reason being is at the beginning, so I use the AWS cloud since 2006. I think I had the account, so I play all the time with it, but it was completely, not that or completely out of scope of my clients, enterprise clients. And the reason was only recently what the features came that the clients, so this is also interesting for you maybe, recently big enterprise companies can work with public cloud privately. So back then, most of the services were public by default. So if you just started VM, you got a public IP address. So if you got S3 bucket, it was more or less public URL. So and now you can actually create your own kind of intranet in the cloud, which is completely isolated. And you can even rent a dedicated line to the cloud, which is dedicated means is really a connection between your data center and the cloud. And what's also different, so now the encryption, key management, and certificate management are really sophisticated. So right now you can encrypt everything in the cloud, which even with customer keys and everything is certified. So the clouds become even more secure than their own data center. So this change in the last, I would say, 3 years. Back then, it's just so the presentation and clouds and so okay. I mean, completely out of scope. Yeah. So maybe if you are a startup, you can do this. But if you already have a data center, why should you do this? And now I had already use cases last year and 2 years ago where it was highly secure application. And I said my clients, if we don't go to the cloud, we probably won't be able to provide the same level of certification for our on-premise data center, with key rotations and encryption and rest and all the stuff. So you are in a good time, because if the enterprise clients notice that they can highly securely start containers in the cloud, and they already have cloud, so I think it's a good time for you. I would say 3 years ago it would be completely uninteresting, I would say.
Yeah, but so of course, besides, we are also thinking about a potential for on-premise product or whatever. Like, depends on what the market needs. If there are certain, businesses, enterprises interested in certain on-premise version of Testcontainers Cloud, however, it will differ in a certain way. But of course, we know this from the other software as a service products that are out there. They always had similar on-premise solutions. Like you have GitHub Enterprise, for example, if you want to do on-premise GitHub. And this is also something we have in the pipeline. Yeah.
So what's interesting also, I mean, if you are a startup right now. Let's imagine we both would create a startup and sell the NFAs. This was the name, right? The NFAs. NFTs, not NFAs. NFTs for the Cobra band, right? Yes. And this is our business. So actually, I think a lot about that. So what we could do, you have two choices. I would say two reasonable choices. One choice is go to the public cloud and just use it properly. The other choice is just rent cheap servers at Hetzner's and install whatever we need there. It is going to be a lot cheaper, but in one point of time, if we grow and the Cobra becomes even more famous than Metallica, for instance, and we need caching, inter-region caching or something, then we will have to migrate to the cloud. And what I see is, the public cloud is not like the cheapest or best solution for everyone. So there are companies which don't have to think global. I think for them, own data center with reasonable admins can be far more reasonable than a public cloud.
So the thing that is hard to provide in your own data center is programmable APIs for everything. So you can do it in theory, of course. There are different offerings, but they are really hard to maintain. Sometimes it's hard to integrate against them, while all the tools integrate against the big cloud providers. So this is a really different.
But funny fact, as Amazon started, they had SOAP interface with VSDL, and now it's REST, but it was WSDL. And there was the first drama in the clouds. There was another company called RightScale, and they just picked, the interfaces and created tooling for the WSDLs and also replicated parts of the cloud. And now we have Amazon, we have Azure, and we have Google, and all the cloud providers provide servers. So you can rent servers from them, like AWS Outposts, for instance, and, put the server to your data center. And this is going to be managed by the cloud. But and you have to pay for it, but it runs in your data center. And what I'm waiting for generic workloads. So because for me, cloud is more than containers. Cloud, there are lots interesting features like let's say manage Kafka, manage Elasticsearch, then text extraction, image recognition. This is really hard to build services. This is one of the killer use cases to go to the cloud. Is completely for me boring. Just to start a Docker container instead of premise in the cloud. I mean, there is no added value, right? So, and what can happen again? That we get, programmable interface for open source clouds running on premise. So you can say, for my virtual machines or for my Docker and for my storage, that is already happening. There is an S3 compatible API called min.io, like, for instance. So OpenStack was also such an effort, but it was not very successful. Yeah. But you know what I mean? So we will get, can happen again, right? So like an open source company like AtomicJar, they will call it Atomic Cloud. They say, okay, cool. We will, we provide programmable interface for a subset of the common resources, which is Amazon compatible or Google compatible, and could also work, right?
Yeah, of course, the challenge is that the big providers, for them, it's not logical to standardize in a way, yes? So it's not good for the business model.
I wouldn't say this, because if you look at Amazon, what they do, they open source a lot. This is amazing what Amazon actually open source. So the Bottle Rocket Linux is open source. The Firecracker VM is open source on GitHub. Then ECS Anywhere, I think, and AKS, the container distribution, is open source. Amazon Linux is so actually, the boring infrastructure is open source. And I think the added value of Amazon is not necessarily the Kubernetes, Dockers, and all the stuff, but the stuff which builds on top of that. So as I said, for instance, Redshift, which is an analytics database, for instance, right? Or Aurora, which is serverless Postgres. So this is the more appealing stuff, which is not open source, but in one point of time it could be, right? You say, okay, now it becomes commodity, so we can open source this as well.
Yeah, so especially like these AI stuff that is coming out right now, also there are crazy use cases out of it.
SageMaker, for instance, this AWS SageMaker, which also runs, for instance, this is also an additional added value. If you need it, go to AWS SageMaker, or there's a Greengrass for IoT. So this is the added value where I say, to build it at home is almost mission impossible. But interesting, if I talk with my enterprise clients, they just would like, to have this called lift and shift. It's like, but this is the most boring use case and with the least added value you can get. So you already have running something on premise, and you putting this to cloud and hope it's getting to be better. And what happens is going to be more expensive, maybe even. But if you build from ground up an application for the cloud, you get even business benefits, because you can even easier calculate the costs. You see how much a transaction costs you actually, and you can easily spin up new environments. So what we forgot to talk about Testcontainers, Testcontainers, AtomicJar, and of course Testcontainers Cloud. So it's something we forgot to talk about.
So nothing I have on my mind yet. So there will be many more news coming out soon during the course of the year, I assume. So keep track of whatever resources we will use to push this stuff out. Mm-hmm. And nothing else I have on my mind, to be honest.
Okay, so then the last question, because you were the last time, I think 1 year ago, where we talk about the test containers. Anything exciting happened between then and now? So what was the biggest release between, if you know it?
Oh, I have to, if I open up the release page. So what I can say.
So you are not prepared. This is what.
So something I have very much on my mind, because I was working on this, or cursed with working on this, was to get the Windows support for test containers kind of onto the same level as we had on Java and macOS all the time. Because also Docker on Windows changed a lot in some ways. So we have now the WSL2 backend in Windows, and in theory everything is transparent, but in practice sometimes not, and then sometimes things break. And we really made sure that the test containers experience on Docker for Windows, also with the new WSL backend, is as good as on the other operating systems, because so Windows users, test containers Windows users are first class users for us as well, just as the other operating systems.
So,
Yeah.
Also, you wanted to say also humans, right? So you wanted to say
yeah, and so
just
the funny thing is I'm on Windows now, and this started in a way to be able to provide better support for test containers on Windows, so that we have one of our developers always testing everything on Windows and making sure test containers has the same good experience for Windows users. Because, like, let's be honest, especially also in Germany, there are many developers, enterprise developers on Windows for whatever different reasons. And yes, so I'm.
And I was just kidding, because I think the Windows 10 is really great operating system, and the 11 is on the horizon. Or do you already working with 11?
No. I didn't, but I checked out a lot of stuff. A lot of cool stuff is happening, and yes, for me, like, one of the really game changers was the really good WSL2 Windows provides now. So Windows subsystem for Linux, that is great, with a really great terminal. Like, I don't know, it's just a quality of life thing that you now have a really good terminal on Windows and not the old one anymore.
Yeah, and the crazy story is, if you use the terminal and you start from the terminal an app, so it searches first in Windows, and if you can find it, it goes to Linux and does that. So I think the integration in Windows is amazing. So it's a lot of fun. So the last times you were at the Airhacks FM, where we talked about test containers, it was before Christmas 2019, and it was the episode number 67. So crazy times. This was really almost 2 years ago. So you're absolutely right. And so we talked a lot about test container system testing, Iron Cobra, of course, and Dodge Charger, and yes. Uli John Roth, exactly. And nice. So you were concerned about improving the developer experience on Windows. This was your main task last 2 years, right? So in Testcontainers, or main task, I mean the hobby task, right? Because you were actually the chief yes. of the blockchain research laboratory in Germany, exactly.
Right? not of the whole of Germany, okay. But yes.
Yeah, we can say it. We don't have to be, exact here. It's just
yes. Fun. So that's what I took over, and in a way, this is also now one of the things I ensure in AtomicJar. So I was the one that said, like, okay, it's fine. I will be the one on Windows, at least initially the one on Windows, and want to make sure that also everything we do with AtomicJar will work great on Windows. And I think this is the case, yes. And I hope the users will be the same. But besides of this, like, if you have an open source project such as Testcontainers that is used by a lot of people, there is like constant noise in the form of like all kind of work, like small bug tickets, user request questions, and so on. And just doing this basic maintenance, so to say, without making any groundbreaking changes is already a lot of work, especially if you do it part-time.
Yeah, I believe it. So, I mean, this is incredible amount of work, actually. A great move. I mean, and for Windows, I mean, right now the company changed a lot. I shipped some Azure functions to Azure. So in Azure Java functions to Azure. And surprisingly, they have Maven archetypes, completely open source. So maybe even, you can also work more closely with Microsoft with better Windows support. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they're open for everything.
Oh, yes,
right now.
We are like actively talking with some of the Azure developers that are providing the containers for like the mock containers for testing some of the Azure functions. Like, I don't know what they have in detail. I'm not the Azure expert, but maybe it's something like Cosmos also. But we are working on providing a better integration with the Testcontainers module. So we have Testcontainers modules for the different cloud mocks, so that you can integration test against their mock containers, which of course will not run the whole functionality of the cloud, but these are the official ones provided by the cloud vendors to give you an integration test feeling.
This is also great.
And for this we are already talking with also people from Microsoft, and yes, it's a great time to collaborate with each other in the industry, I feel.
Yeah. It's also a great idea and use case, because what happens right now, you will have to use the Maven archetype. It will create a zip archive and deploy to Azure Cloud, and it takes maybe half a minute or minute. But in your particular case, you can make it completely transparent and faster. So if you're developing a lots of serverless stuff like Azure Functions with test containers, I see the point. Exactly the same ACI, Azure Container Instances, where you spin up containers. You could also, maybe there is also a mock environment, so I'm not sure about that. But you could actually achieve a lot with your environment. So what can happen is, right, so that the Testcontainers cloud moves a little bit to a direction like, semi-ephemeral, lightweight cloud mock. So where are not always starting and stopping the services per unit or integration test, rather than keep them running and decide outside a test when to shut it down. What I can also imagine in a CI/CD pipeline, for instance, is also you could start, the test earlier, then run the pipeline, and at the end shut it down, for instance. Otherwise, I will have to do it, almost in a stateless manner in my unit test. But I could, start it first, then run the unit tests if I know what I'm doing. Or I could even, start multiple environments and have it like a partition. This group of tests uses this database, and this group of tests uses a different database. So this could be actually prepared before at the startup, or we can parallelize that, because what I can also do, I can say, check out the source code and start the test containers in parallel, for instance.
Yes, so we can do this test containers in general, and with test containers cloud, test containers cloud as well. Yeah. So if you, for example, just fork your test execution, it will automatically associate with different instances, and you will get multiple containers. And test containers also has always been built with this use case in mind. So already locally, that you don't get port conflicts or whatever for multiple containers starting. But this, of course, doesn't scale on a local machine in generally. So you can only start up so many parallel Kafkas, so to say. In the cloud, however, you can scale horizontally very big. So this is a great use case. And something else you mentioned, and I like this definition of semi-ephemeral, is a good point, because often you also have a use case where you want to keep the containers for longer for some debugging purposes or whatever. So looking into the database, how is the state? You don't want to have it removed directly. And this is also a direction into which we will expand more in the future, helping basically the whole developer cycle, also with the debugging, making it more convenient. Yes.
Nice. Where people can find you on the internet?
So it is AtomicJar.com.
You have to look it up. So this is a true startup.
Definitely. Right? I don't visit our website too often. Yes, but of course, like we are on Twitter as well. So we are AtomicJar on Twitter, and I'm Keyview on Twitter, and the others. B-Side Up is Sergey. And Richard is on Twitter. His handle is WitchRich. Okay, perfect. So I would say in a few months or a few years, we will talk again, hopefully about AtomicJar and not complete different research projects, And how your Iron Cobra is doing? You practice a lot still or nothing? We were, during Corona, in complete standby.
Yeah, but you can still practice some solos at home, no?
We could in theory, but we were not. We were in complete standby, also because the bass player is living other side of Germany. So
but you didn't practice nothing? No.
As a band? No. But as a lone person, yes. But as a band?
Yeah. As a lone, I mean, you practice the scales or whatever, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
that's like the general routine. But what I can say, and now I wonder if I said this already back then, but we have the next album written. So most songs are written. So I would hope, I don't know, this year recording, maybe not, but beginning of next year, the recording would happen. And then finally we'll have a new Iron Cobra album.
What will be the name? Then. Can you reveal that or no? Test Containers. The Test Cobra.
Test Containers and NFTs.
Yeah.
So I think the working title will be Eternal Dagger. Yes.
Eternal Dagger. Okay. Interesting. Very good. So thank you. And I invite you back in, I don't know, 1 year at the most. Bye.
Let's do it. Looking forward to it. Yes. Bye.